and outside Calcutta. Again, very good evening. Now, our program, today's webinar will start. First, at the beginning, we shall pay respect to Swami Ognibes and keep silence for 1 minute, and then Sri Samar Bagchi will introduce two speakers, Medha Patkar ji and Professor Jayanta Bandyopadhyay, and then our today's program will start. And prior to that, Sri Jayanta Bandyopadhyay requested us will say few words on Swami Ognibes. Thank you again. I will hand over the program to Sri Pradeep Das, and he will count 1 minute time, and we will pay respect to Swami Ognibes. The time will start. Pradeep.
When he was attending the meeting of the Anti-Slavery Committee of the United Nations. And that gave me the opportunity to know Swamiji as a human being so closely and so intensely. A person of great knowledge of all religions, religious texts, a person, a wide-hearted human being, very, very jovial at times. It was so much a fun to a guest in my apartment in Geneva. And in Delhi also, when I was passing through Delhi, I used to stay with him a number of times. It is a big personal loss which I wanted to record today. Thank you. Thank you, sir. I'm through.
Now, we have got two very formidable presenters today. One is a doyen of people's movement, Srimati Medha Patkar, whom needs no introduction. The hero of the Narmada Bachao movement, though she will not agree to it, so the people of Narmada are the heroes, real heroes. And she is a leader of also the National Alliance for People's Movement, which is also an outcome. Now, Srimati Patkar has been involved in organizing people all over India, and it has branches in different parts of India, including in West Bengal. So today we are so glad that Medhaji is with us. She is from Tata Institute of Social Science, and then when she went for research there in the Narmada Valley, and that changed her. Her family is also in politics. His father was involved in the socialist movement. So we are so glad you have agreed to participate in this program. Dr. Jayanta Bandyopadhyay, he was the chairman of policy and planning of IIM Calcutta. Also, that he was not a scientist on the water, river, but also he is an activist too. When he was in Dehradun, he got involved in the movement to remove the dolomite mines in the Mussoorie region. So we are also glad to have Professor Jayanta Bandyopadhyay. Thanks to both these two great personalities to have us have them in our midst. So we request first Srimati Medhaji to say this program originated when 34 organizations who are involved in mainly environment movement and social movement and science education movement, they organized a talk of mine on alternative paradigm of development, Tagore and Gandhi. And then they realized that this movement should be carried forward. So there's a request to Medhaji and also Jayanta Babu to give us a view about what has happened to environment and why it has come, what kind of situation, how perhaps also how to search for an alternative and create that alternative in the slogan of National Alliance of People's Movement is Sanghars or Nirman. So we'd like to hear from Medhaji about all this. Okay, I shall request now Medhaji to kindly start the program.
Not switch over that easily because so should I start in English?
Yes, please. Start in English. Yes, sure.
I'm sorry I cannot speak in Bangla, but I'm happy that not one or two, but 34 organizations have come together to organize this webinar inspired by Samartha, you all, and also inspired by the situation that is faced by all of us, especially those who live on the natural resources and human power. The communities we always have in focus and sections in all our work areas and work plans. I'm also happy that Jayanta Bandyopadhyay is here. Jayantoda said loss of Swami Agnivesh is very close to my heart also, because he was always in the valley of Narmada whenever we faced any crisis. And he was always at Jantar Mantar, where he himself lived with his inspiring any language, Hindi, English, Telugu, and so on. And he was a man against communalism, strongly the views in favor of Sarva Dharma Samabhav, and from local communities to the United Nations. His reach and his interventions were very, very special. He also intervened in resolving the conflict between the Maoists and some of the bureaucrats who they had, hijacked. So Swamiji was very close to us, and he was a great support to people's movements, not only Arya Samaj. I pay deep tribute to him and his commitment to simple living, not only as an Arya Samaji, but also one who stood for sustainability as well as justice, is to be remembered when we speak and have this dialogue in the webinar. Thanks to the organizers that I'm given this opportunity. I know that the scientists who are in this webinar are also active scientists, not just the scientists. And all of you youngsters to be involved in various environments. And hence, there is very little that may be contributed as something new or the serendipitous facts. But what we need to really go through is the fact that environment has again come to be an issue at the focus of discussions and debates, not only in India, but across. And this happens whenever there is any natural calamity faced by us. May it be clouds, may it be heavy rainfall, earthquakes, cyclones, drought and flood cycle, melting of snows and rising of seas and disappearance of the groundwater and dying of rivers with sea coming in as sea ingress. All this and other natural calamities really shake us and remind us of the fact that human beings are also a part of the ecosystem. the environment. But along with us, there are also other living beings, and those include the cattle to the viruses. And hence, when these kinds of calamities are coming through with much higher frequency and intensity, obviously the impacts are also very, very high. And it is therefore necessary to understand that today we are at in the situation, all the natural resources and ecosystems around us are likely to come to an end. And then when 37,000 to 1 lakh species are becoming extinct every year, will our own species, the human species, survive? Is a question at large. Friends, you already know that we have faced cyclones. How many? You faced Ayla and you faced Amphan this year. Much of destruction has Ukha, tsunami, or every of these cyclones, including Nisarga in Maharashtra, Western Ghats, have brought to us. The valuations cannot just be in terms of money, in crores. It is an invaluable loss to the natural resources, which are also the sources of livelihood for various communities who live with nature, not only depleting nature. And hence it is very necessary to understand that when we have even heavy erratic rainfall with 74 increase within a year, 321 places there was heavy rainfall in 2018, while it was 560, the number of places where it occurred. And when half of the population was facing drought, the rest half was facing flood. This kind of situation in a state like Bihar or in Gangetic Plains is experienced all of us. And it is therefore necessary to understand as to what will be the situation just a few decades ahead. Will it not be the temperature rise if we go on with the emissions, which has come to 400 ppm in 2013? And if 1 ppm means 300 crores of tons of carbon, imagine today the magnitude is not less than 1,000 crore tons of carbons getting added per year. Now, if this is the situation, what is it that is going to be experienced? In the corona-based lockdown, we know in this pandemic that our villages in the Narmada Valley, especially in the hilly and mountain ranges, do not have the coronavirus affecting people. Why? Because there are ventilators, which are natural ventilators. The green cover is giving oxygen unbound, and hence not just the immunity, but the oxygen, very limited carbon dioxide in air is saving life and nature, and life based on nature as livelihoods. Friends, one can go on and describe the situation that is faced across the world today. But we know that when the sea level is rising, the cities, the megalopolis like Mumbai are threatened with loss of life. And that becomes an issue for the politicians, because the city dwellers, the elites, really are always at the focus of anything that is planned, visualized, or changed. But we know that when the cities, the urbanization, is bringing in something like the enormous increase in urban transport, the private transport, even post-lockdown, sector business is really gaining huge profits. While a city like Detroit in USA has its economy already affected and destroyed after the pollution started rising to the unlimited bound, and that had to be changed, changing the transport policy itself. It is therefore one needs to understand that when we have the green cover getting lost, 10 lakh acres in 11 years, it is not just the natural resources, but it is also the life support that is being lost. If it is the forest that is lost, we lose both land, including groundwater, including the affected aquifers. When the landslides or just removal of or destruction of topsoil begins, the agriculture, the source of livelihood for more than 50 to 60% of our population, gets severely affected. So, my dear friends, all of this, we cannot just wait for a natural calamity, whether it is Corona or Hudhud, Oki or Amphan, to occur in order to realize that we cannot raise a foolish question as to whether we want environment or development. That is the question that was raised by one of the present power holder, the minister himself in the parliament few months ago. And then came Corona, which has locked down our lives. So when this happens, everyone realizes how it affects not just the natural ecosystem as if it is around us, but it affects us, our life and our livelihood. And hence it is necessary to understand as to why Dr. James and from NASA in USA also has said that this is the last chance for the humankind to save itself. Why has James Anderson, who was a scientist researching on the ozone layer, also has said that we have at the most 30 years ahead. And such kind of not threats, but challenges and also the warnings have come from not less than 11,000 and more scientists from 153 countries who have declared already climate emergency. It is really understandable. हम ये समझ सकते हैं कि 48 देशों में, राष्ट्रों में भी ये इस प्रकार की हो चुकी है और वो अब अपनी विकास की अवधारणा, अपने विकास का नियोजन, उसकी दिशा, उसकी प्रक्रिया, उसमें जो तकनीक की चुनौती है, जो महात्मा जी ने हिंद स्वराज से ही हमारे सामने रखी है, पर हम भूल जाते हैं उस हिंद स्वराज को, लेकिन उसके फिर से याद दिलवाते हैं समरदा से लेकर ये 11,000 हम सब लोगों के सामने स्पष्ट और प्रखर रूप से बात रखते हुए। साथियों, इसीलिए मैं ये भी आपके सामने लाना चाहती हूँ कि wherever women are at the helm of the affairs, may it be Angela Merkel in Germany or Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, they are the ones who have taken a lead in changing the paradigm. When Angela Merkel announced a time-bound plan to withdraw from thermal power, certainly that was hailed, but with a question as to whether we can even survive all these years till she withdraws her nation state from the thermal. Obviously not. And hence, even that time-bound plan should be put forth on war footing less than that. And we know what is happening in our own country. While on one hand, our country, our nation state, our leaders, including Prime Minister himself, are participating with his whole paraphernalia in various international summits to conferences. And his thumb impression goes on every agreement that comes as a result of those programs. But whether it was the Rio de Janeiro summit or let us know that whatever is signed on or ratified is not necessarily followed in our own country and in many nation states by the leaders. And hence we understand why is every sector here is witnessing, even after lockdown, as a result of the minus GDP, something that is claimed to be the only way out to raise our GDP again. Now, what is GDP? It is just the gross magnitude of products that doesn't take into consideration the criterion of sustainability or of justice. And hence, it is very necessary to understand that the environment, if we want to save it, it is not just the society, our but our economies and polity also must be changed. And hence, the warning must reach out to our planners, to politicians, local, global. And those politicians with a heavy warning, because she realized that only the micro level efforts will not really be able to save all of us. And that is the situation we are facing even today. Friends, in our country, what is happening? The decisions are promoting more and more of urbanization and the consumerist lifestyle of urban India. It is promoting the urbanization where the depletion of resources and use of resources towards increasing amount of comforts is really taking a toll of not just the resources in their hands, but the resources in the hands of the Adivasis, in the hands of the toiling masses, the farmers, the laborers, the fish workers, the forest produce gatherers, and others. And hence, when the decisions are made on monuments as which I just referred to, which would really promote urbanization without considering even the immediate issue like air pollution, which is killing people to a larger extent than the corona pandemic does. Something which is affecting our respiratory systems and going into the lungs and blood and all of our organs, which cannot be saved in the present kind of and culture of our medical services, but it cannot also be saved otherwise. We understand that the legislations are being reformed. Now, what are these reforms aimed at? When we look at the EIA 2020, today was up to this midnight, the last day for you all and me also to really put forth our views, our challenge, our opposition to this EIA notification. And if we have not already done it, we have to do it immediately after this webinar. This is because the EIA is not just one notification. No doubt it is not a law in itself, but it is out of the law and the total environmental legal regime, which is the 1986 Environment Protection Act, 1980 Forest Conservation Act, Air Act, Water Act, and so on of 1970s as well. But this notification will really take away the controls and monitoring mechanisms which have been controlling the depletion, whether of coal blocks or of the river waters. Save the coastal regions and also bring in the coastal management plans. But when this notification is going to almost demolish that regime which had the public consultation in all the projects which required the consultation due to the anticipated environmental impacts, and it also gives an opportunity for the project authorities, who would include corporates, to an increase an opportunity to seek clearance post facto, that is after the project becomes a fait accompli, and also compensate the losses, not by regenerating forests or reviving the rivers that are lost, which is impossible, but also by paying money. So this kind of notification, which would allow the 22,000 kilometer long waterways to proceed with the cargo transport inside our rivers, whether it's Narmada, what will remain? Certainly not the pure water, certainly not the flowing of pure water into our rivers, which are already affected. So this kind of notification really brings out the legislative changes in the environmental laws, and that is because the politics around environment, politics of natural resources itself is changing. It is changing towards not just globalization as Vasudha. Otherwise, we would, who share one earth, would have certainly supported this. But it is towards privatization, which is corporatization, and which is depletion and destruction and disparity building within every sector. So friends, when this notification is just one but important symbol, we know that even in other sectors, the legislative changes or amendments, the new laws and new brought in even during lockdown, without the democratic process that would have gone through if the parliament was existing. Tomorrow, the parliament session is going to begin, but there would be no 0 hour for questioning what remains. So this kind of fascist process for changing laws and changing the legal regime is something that is a bigger threat than anything else. So the change is not just in the natural climate, but the change is in the economic and political climate, which needs to be taken into cognizance. I would say that beyond industrialization, which I just referred to, but the industrial production, which is around us in our lives also is going to be raised beyond limits and has already gone towards that end. And this is related directly to our lifestyles. Urbanization as well as industrialization has brought in maximum mechanization. And as I said, that may be reducing, giving our comforts and reducing drudgery even in the lives of women. But can we understand that that is also killing our pure air and pure water, which is bringing in further drudgery into the lives of women, real life makers, not just life givers. So friends, the industrialization as well as urbanization, which is claimed to be an achievement of humankind and an achievement of science that really makes intervention into the natural ecosystems which other living beings cannot. But then whether the science and science alone can help us save when we have no immunity building against corona today beyond a limit, and we have to really go in for the naturopathy, ayurveda, and all kind of systems which were otherwise not accepted by the allopathic doctors, the medical servants, who also are committed but are not open to the various medical systems now are bound to take cognizance of that as friends. And science, which is a body of facts, and also hypotheses and laws are built around those. But operationalization of the scientific knowledge through scientific method which tests, which verifies every application is something that is a process which is critical. And that is operationalizing science into technologies. But we have not just one technology, we have technologies and technologies in every single sector. Take it as water. We have to use water. We cannot say don't touch a river, don't touch a flowing stream, don't stop a rivulet. But to go by the Tennessee Valley Corporation's claims of those days, or the Mississippi River Valley that was bound with a number of dams years ago from 1978 to 1993. No, we cannot just be blindfolded and go and follow the same paradigm, because the United States of America itself has changed its paradigm. It's declared a moratorium, not just because the salmon, a fish, was lost, but because they studied the economics of big dams in details. And I still remember when, as one of the 12 commissioners of World Commission on Dams, I had an in-depth dialogue with Dan Beard. Daniel Beard was the chief of the Bureau of Reclamation in USA. That was the department building large dams and planning large dams. But they really declared moratorium, and he told me that it is the economics that is affected, not just the ecology. My dear friends, therefore, we who do not go into the real impacts of large dams, and especially the impacts of the series of dams or the cascade of dams, not just in the Loire River in France, but also in India, in Narmada, in Godavari, in Krishna, in Kaveri, in Ganga. We cannot just say that we will link the rivers and everything will come to an end, that the flood will be controlled and the water problem will be solved. No, we have to have an analysis of cumulative impact on the environment, the livelihoods, the habitats, and everything. And the survival then gets affected if we do not do this and continue with the same paradigm, which is destroying riverine populations. Same is happening to the coastal populations, as I just mentioned. The fish workers in West Bengal, fighting with the leadership of Pradeep Chatterjee and others, are realizing how the one cyclone after another is destroying their lives. And they are the ones who then travel to Pune, to Mumbai as migrants. And then they could not even get the amount of food they require. Why talk about the payment of wages during lockdown? I'm following with Ratan Sarkar in South Dinajpur. I'm following with Matiur and Moinur in South Dinajpur to Malda, to every state, district almost in West Bengal, from where the migrants came in. but the legislations for the laborers is also getting changed. So when the agriculture is affected, the agricultural laborers are affected, not just the landholders. When the employment is affected based on the natural resources on which they were surviving till date, then certainly migration increasing affects the lives and the children's lives and the women's lives in the workers' families. And my friends, the labor legislations are also weakened. This is again to promote the corporatization. And the corporates, we all know, are for profit over people. And when now the public sector units are also given up as donation almost to Adanis and Ambanis, not just the coal blocks or airports, but the infrastructure to even the railway. We realize and we must that the carbon emissions are going to be increasing. The choice of technology is not going to be aiming at simplicity, simple living, self-reliance. No doubt Atmanirbhar Bharat is talked about, but the Atmanirbhar or Swayam Nirbhar, not Atmamukta, but Swayam Nirbhar, self-reliant village communities also are coming to an end, because the intervention of market and marketized forces with their money is taking place again in every sector. The sectors and the roles which are listed in the schedules of the Constitution begin with the Schedule 11, where the village community has a right to take care of water management, to take care of the sources of energy and production of energy, to take care of agriculture, to education, primary and secondary as well. But when the schedules are also ignored and the constitutional rights to the directive principles are not followed, it is the fact that the communities after communities are losing their control over the decision making at large. So community to the elected representatives, when they are bypassed, and the fascist way the corporates are ruling the country, and the international financial institutions are intervening in every sector, into education, to infrastructure, and also health. We know that 40,000 crores of rupees have come through 9 different agreements during lockdown to help and support and protect the corona affected and corona to be affected. But in fact, that money is not really going for the real survival of those who are affected. And this is what is happening. That money goes into such activities and such plans that aims more at GDP and not at GEP. No one really takes into consideration while announcing GDP or weeping over the minus, how much is the loss to the gross environmental, not property, but preservable heritage of ours. So friends, it is necessary to understand that the state here in India, as in many other countries, is really going on towards in the opposite direction, and hence we have to take a clue from whatever is happening and said nationally and internationally. Protect environment. Unless we have green cover, we will not be able to protect our land or water, or even protect the carbon emissions. Unless we have the limited amount of mining and mineral extraction, both major and mineral, we will not be able to protect either the subsurface water sources and the water cycles, nor can we protect the earth or the rivers. Unless we change our transport policy and really comes put heavily, that can be much improved for the people to be comfortable with it, and not to have thousands and thousands of vehicles, unnecessary number of vehicles per family or per city onto our streets, and then related infrastructure, unless we also control that and really pay attention to the real meaty infrastructure, like the pathways in the rural communities and the godowns for the agricultural produce or the fish produce, and the jetties, but not the private ports on the coastal region, so on and so forth, we will not be able to save and our country. In agriculture, the corporatization is being pushed through the 3 latest ordinances, which whole of the unity of farmers organizations, the All India Farmers Organizations Alliance of ours, with 250 organizations, and you all would denounce these ordinances tomorrow on the first day of our parliament session, to be started after months. We are opposition because we know that even in the agriculture, the contract farming, the corporate farming is being brought into it. And even the agricultural produce committees, the only democratic forum for marketing, is going to be finished off, and the private mandis are to begin. How can one ensure even minimum support price, not even optimum, to the agriculturists, who according to us include not just the landowners, farmers, but the agricultural laborers, the fish workers, and others who live on nature. As I want the complete change into the technological choices in each sector. We need to really bring in that technology, which will mostly be labor intensive, which will be based on the handmade economic paradigm, as Mr. Prasanna from Karnataka, actor, activist, has been saying and fighting for. We need to save handloom and power looms, but not just going for large textile mills, which the owners are closing down anyway when they see profit into cement, as Birlas have done with our sanctuary mill workers, and we have to fight. But for all these alternative paradigms, we have to also consider how to really get united and then challenge it. No doubt we have to begin with our own, really be able to save nature. A drop to save lives, every drop of water, every grain, every leaf, piece of paper, cloth, every drop of fuel and unit of energy we save, and stop emitting every molecule of CO2, and stop adding a particle of pollutant to Pancha Mahabhutas that will care and heal the ailing nature and save life on earth. This is a para sent to me on my Facebook and WhatsApp by one Dr. Vora in Maharashtra. I feel this really includes much that an individual should attempt to attain. We are all on a continuum. Greta has declared that she will never travel by air. All of us cannot do it because we have to prick a thorn by a thorn. When they are going wildly with a great speed, we also have to have a speed in countering the wrongdoings, wrong actions, and wrong processes which are anti-democratic and unconstitutional, and that is unsustainable too. We have to then fight for justice, because all those who get affected with this impact on environment of all these activities I just mentioned in are basically those who are called poor. In fact, they are rich. They are rich in natural resources. They are rich in human power, and hence they cannot be just insulted by calling them poor, but rather their ways and means of harnessing resources is something that we must really go back to, go forward to. and that only will save us. It is therefore necessary that we choose the technology, we choose the alternative paradigm, but we also start with the constructive activities along with the struggle against all the wrongs that are imposed upon us by our own rulers, our own planners, and for which it is necessary that we go to Gram Swaraj in one way or another. We cannot achieve it altogether immediately, but we have to really empower our communities with the money coming to the Gram Panchayat, so on and so forth, to really build their own ways to generate employment. It can be self-employment as in agriculture sector, as in water management and energy generation. But if that is to be done, we have to be committed to something that the Paris is committing to. Today, the Paris as a famous city, a beautiful city, is committing itself to a 15-minute city. What does it mean? It means that they will have self-reliance on the services and goods which would be available within a walk or bicycle by 15 minutes. If it is not 15 minutes, it may be 1 hour, but not beyond that. Have to have the exercises such as district planning exercise, which was once taken up by Kerala itself. And that kind of exercise, Supreme Court has indirectly by asking all the state governments to generate employment. We would expect the West Bengal government of Mamtadi, who fought in Singur and Nandigram, to really take this new path. She is not for land acquisition anymore, I know, but she must also change the technologies in many, many sectors so that while the West Bengal government is appointing a huge force in the forest department, I know. If it is for greening, it should also be a choice of infrastructure and choice of industry and choice of everything that would save the existing green cover as well. My dear friends, therefore, we need to really have this view of economy, this view of polity, and representatives must represent this view and not the view that the corporates are bringing in, whether it is the sector of education, which is also going online, and the digitalization in every sector is giving us the corporate viewpoint or not. We have to build our own viewpoint if we have to save life, save nature, and save humankind. Otherwise, with survival at stake, there would be many more deaths with malnourishment. Will that be acceptable? Will that be just? Will that be humane? No. So you all know that we have to begin with the micro units wherever we are, whether it is a cooperative society that you are living in, a cooperative fishing society that we have in the Narmada Valley, 37 of those, or whether we are in a village community or an urban ward. We must really take that unit and go into the planning exercises which will be participatory, transparent, and also accountable to the rest of the society and the whole world. And that's our basic needs. But as Mahatma Ji said, we can have enough for fulfilling this, but no one's greed. And only that will save us from the huge destruction of environment that is also bringing in huge disparity amongst the human sections of populations and between human beings and living beings, which would give rise to not just corona, but a number of viruses. Do you know, my friends, that it is expected that 30 times bigger virus can come from melted, can be released from underneath the ice that is melting, 3 times dangerous than even CO2. So with these threats and warnings, that is not from me or activists who can be jailed and who can be stopped without considering the freedom of expression. But the virus be stopped and the destruction cannot be stopped. And hence, we have to really come forward with courage and commitment to talk more about it, to spread the messages more and more, and also to get into action from individual to the societal level, which can be local to national to international. I stop here. I've taken longer time. I'm sorry, but I was given 45 minutes by the organizers. So I hope that I have conveyed the viewpoints and can answer questions if those come up after Dr. Jayanta the valuable presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Medha ji, namaskar. Medha ji
Namaskar.
Namaskar ji. And I came to know Medha ji, and since then she has been one of the pathfinders of people's movement and coordinator of many of the movements. So it's a pleasure to be speaking after you, but it is a very difficult task. You have mentioned many issues very correctly, and I thought, how should I start from what you have mentioned and put some new values. So I will go part of the presentation when you talk of the changing the economics and changing the politics. All the details of destruction, environmental destruction, whether it is in the air, in the form of either very high level atmospheric pollution of carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases, or low level in the city level pollutions, destruction of the river systems, the forests are almost gone. They are all individual issues. But I thought, what is the mechanism? What is the process of putting together all these losses into one single articulation? And I consider that single articulations, our party, is the almost unchallenged acceptance of one word as the goal of all human societies, all nations, that is economic growth. Economic growth goes on unchallenged. That if we lose 23% in the first quarter because of the coronavirus, it is a disaster. So we have given the word economic growth a divine status. All of us have never challenged it as a wrong concept. We can say deforestation is wrong, river pollution is wrong, atmospheric pollution is bad, but economic growth is good. This is our fallacy. And then there are enough consulting organizations throughout the world to tell, oh, you're down, you should correct it. That means bad and good, correct and incorrect is already decided. And the result of that economic growth process, whatever it is, we have to accept because we are committed to economic growth. Now, what is economic growth? Economic growth comes out from the economics that grew out of the Industrial Revolution in Europe, had very little to do with anything but industrial production, marketing, and the serious attempt to challenge Economic Growth by Mehboob Haq and later Amartya Sen has been very successfully marginalized in Human Development Index, which no one cares. Everyone cares about the gross domestic product-oriented economic growth. If we have to grow as a nation, we have to grow at 5%, we have to grow at 6%, growing at 10%, we have to grow at 12%. What is that growth? Please think of what is this growth that is the headline every day in our newspapers. And that growth is a distorted, partial, incorrect expression of profit and loss. The moment Mehboob Haq and Amartya Sen wanted to introduce social parameters, education, health, that moment, the original incorrect, incomplete GDP was protected by into Human Development Index, which no one cares. No one thinks of. And if we add the environmental cost, the GDP has to be negative. So protect GDP by false complexes, by false ideas, so that these social dimensions, health dimensions, environmental dimensions can be suitably, theoretically kept out accounts box. This is what we have all been conditioned to think, that GDP growth is good. Now, what is GDP growth? GDP growth has a very interesting support in what is called the Kuznets, environmental Kuznets curve. That for some time, a newly industrializing economy will have environmental problems, but in due course, it will overcome it and all environmental problems will be solved. This is what comes out of the environmental curve of the Kuznets type. Now, what happens is actually growing economy, industrialized countries, they start importing their material from other countries, and you see a development of environmental quality within those countries. So the Kuznets curves, again, is a false curve, where the totality of the consumption of all these countries are not taken. They are nice forests, nice grasslands, nice rivers. After the initial hiccups of industrialization are shown that now you have grown, the growth has come, and growth is good for the environment, and look at the Kuznets curve. GDP, we have to also question Kuznets curve. Because without questioning this, we have very little access to questioning what is happening in the forests, what is happening in the rivers. For 30, 40 years, we have been trying to do that. From Rio, we have not progressed a single inch. We have not been seen any action on the crucial issues. I will come to details about it on global warming. I distinguish between global warming and climate change. Global warming is much more harmful than climate change. And we have to think through all the root cause of environmental degradation, environmental disaster, including cyclones, are focused on one point, the global agenda of protecting GDP as a concept of national goal. And this is where we have to also start questioning. Alternative movements have not gone into this theoretical attack. Alternative movements have tried to show little successes which have not been able to expand beyond smaller areas. For 30, 40, 50, 60 years, we have seen that. Why? because the outer community, the broader community, they are looking for GDP growth. Medha ji has very correctly says industrialization, urbanization. It's to a very narrow, very wrong GDP growth, which if you put the whole sort of debit and credit together, doesn't stand much hope of becoming a positive growth, but we are continuing with it. Sometimes I think that we are conditioned, our lifestyle is conditioned and manipulated, in which case we are stuck with a destructive, environmentally destructive economic process, and we are helpless in challenging it. I will go to the very fundamental issue of global warming. Can we think of not using fossil fuel? Can we think of a energy purely based on non-fossil sources? Coal is going on in our country, in China, in United States, the top 3 producers of the greenhouse gases. None of these countries are thinking in that very, very environmentally sane way of finding energy. But if we have done the wrong thing, if we have got growth out of the wrong thing, what do you do? This is where very cunningly and very smartly as development. Please use these words with some caution. GDP growth, is it development? But we know economic development means 10% GDP growth, 6% GDP growth. These are issues where we have to now crack the whole conceptual framework and go for what is being increasingly recognized as that if we have a wrong path of development through GDP growth, should we continue or we go in the path of degrowth? We go back. If we have taken a wrong road in some of the crossings, after knowing that you have taken a wrong turn, you keep running on the same road. We do not have the courage to say that we have to go back. We do not have the audacity to say growth is underdevelopment. And I think time has come to say that growth is underdevelopment unless it is comprehensive, unless it is socially and environmentally totally acceptable. Growth is underdevelopment, and development could be degrowth.
For the majority of the people.
Pardon me?
For the majority of the people of India.
Yeah.
For the it is a degrowth.
Yeah. Degrowth could be development. Development has to be that we get out of this destructive but economically so-called growth-oriented processes. Because unless we hit at the root of the concept, we will always be defeated. We will always find our forests are gone, mining is taken out, our waters are destroyed. The whole root cause is a almost divine recognition that economic or development is GDP growth. Now look at our inability to get out of fossil fuel and what is happening. No other environmental degradation is as destructive as global warming. Because global warming is collecting our, Medha ji has very correctly said, it has become 400 ppm. The recent data is 410 ppm. And originally, it was around 200, below 200. But since we didn't have enough measuring stations for temperature and quality of the air, we take 1880 as the dividing line between pre-industrial and industrial. But remember, industry started in 1600s. And by 1600 to 18, half of the greenhouse gases had already been emitted. But there is no data, and hence we call it 1800 to 1900 is the pre-industrial average. There is also a conceptual flaw in that. It is not pre-industrial. Industrial revolution starts in 1500 and 1600. So what we see as environmental destruction has a backup, has a hidden process which we do not see. And we do not see because we have been that these are economic growth oriented processes, they are essential. And human civilization has to advance based on GDP growth. If you are not having GDP growth, your civilization is not advancing. But in India, in China, there had been attempts at redefining what is the object of civilizational advancement. Tagore and Gandhi, Samarda has worked extensively on it. Mao, Chairman Mao, had a rather idea on what science, what knowledge is important for the economic growth of China. But then came the Deng Xiaoping line, and that's a different story. Deng Xiaoping rehabilitated the Western technology as the prime mover of economic growth, and we see what's happening in China today. I will talk a little bit about being a student of material science. I have also been following what's happening in physics. I have been following the market of technology, and I have written a little bit on this. I think economic growth is not a product of any democratic decision that we have to go for a higher rate of economic growth. It is now very clear to me that the world is focused on a few centers of generation of technology. And then those new technologies are marketed very successfully as objects of modernity. To be modern, you have to have your mobile. If you do not have a good sort of up quality mobile, you are not modern. So this marketing of technology is built into another concept. I started with economic growth, then came to false concept of development, and now I'm talking about a marketed idea of modernity so that others can purchase. To be modern is to have the latest model of the car. You go to any of the industrialized countries, go to our cities, Bombay, Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, Kolkata. Your modernity is decided not by your thought process. Your modernity is not checked by how full you are as a human being, but whether your car is 2019 model or 2010 model. So this built-in marketing of products of modern technology as modernity gives a very, very simple step-by-step advancement for our civilization. And here I go back to the term which China has used but have not really put into much practice, the ecological civilization. Ecological civilization as opposed to the economic civilization. And this ecological civilization has to go into our minds, go into our thought processes. It is a very difficult task to talk about these issues at length. No big media will take what I am saying. No big media will say that modernity is a package in which new technologies are sold. This has been written, but I think the population think about such things, but we have to really think in details if we have to go for a ecological civilization. Without going into ecological civilization, we will not be able to save our forests, and that will create the type of development which is independent of economic growth, which is sort of ill-informed economic growth. We will have a totality of growth based on all the aspects. If my whole community is happy, it is a product of good growth. And when the Bhutan people came to the United Nations by saying there is this idea of gross happiness, gross national happiness, it really shook the gross national product wallahs. That if you are happy with a lower amount of consumption, but your gross national happiness is the ideal, then why go for gross national product? Because gross national product, if it has to grow, it has to consume the nature somehow inevitable. Many people think that technology will solve it. Technology will solve all the problems, but when we have growth in population, when we have growth in consumption, and we have growth in the lifestyle of that population, which is urbanization, where a 50 liter per day water consumption suddenly becomes 400 liters per day of consumption. Vegetarian meal in the village, we have a strongly non-vegetarian meal in the cities with, say, 16 to 18 times more land intensity. We have to say that unless our civilizational values are changed, we will be, even after 20 years, saying our rivers are bad, our forests are going. Now, this is where my main is that we have to keep challenging, not only in the field, not only in the movements, which is out there in the fields, but also inside the minds. If at least 20% of Indian people think that our growth is not proper type, our development has to be reorganized by degrowth. Now, why should we always think of catching up? Catching up with the wrong process. Catching up is a very commonly sold economic term that all developing countries will have to catch up. Catch up with what? I think the wrongly developed economies of the industrialized world will have to catch up with others. So the catching up has to be in the different direction. Catching up has to be in a reverse direction, which is degrowth, or at least steady state growth. So this media-based catching up idea, in which many economists have contributed very, very effectively, has to be fought over. And economics is the main tool modern economics is the main tool of promoting economic growth as development. I think there comes the new politics, where the new development has to be a new politics. New development has to be a new sociology. It has to go beyond a very narrow modern microeconomic process and economics of society, of ecology, and many things. So I think we are going quite a bit off the time. I think the way Medhaji had very succinctly and very rightly identified the problems, they all, I thought, how can I bring in a much more fundamental flaw in our thoughts, which is taken advantage of by the market system, as if market is free. How free is the market? You know, it's not free market. It is absolutely moderated and very much manipulated market. You cannot, a poor person cannot get into that market. So free market is another of the term where economics have failed. And I think all these terms now, all our NGOs, all our activists need to go full force against the false terminologies, incorrect meanings, and immoral uses of those meanings in our national or global economic affairs. I think I would, for the time being, withdraw and then get into the question and answers. Thank you, Samantha, for inviting me.
Dr. Bandyopadhyay, we had a marvelous presentation, and you have added a new dimension to the thinking. I always say that science has been hijacked by two things. One is capital, and second is consumerism. And consumerism is increasing the capital. When you say increase of GDP, whose GDP is increasing? Whose wealth is increasing? If you read the report of 2020 by Oxfam, it says that today 70% of the wealth of the country is in the hand of only 1%. Only 1%. In few years back, it was only 58.3. So the economic growth that you are talking of is really increasing the wealth of the richest, and the rich and poor divide is going on increasing. That is what Thomas Piketty, in his marvelous book, has shown, Capital in the 21st Century. So now I think we should open this for questions from who are listening to this program. Is Medhaji there on the... Medhaji, are you there? Has Medhaji left?
No,
Let
sir.
us see.
No,
Medhaji?
she is there.
She is there. Okay. So let us have questions. Those who are listening to this program, if you have questions, you can directly put it also to the, and you can name to whom you are asking the question.
Okay, sir. Two person raise hand. First, Saurabh Chatterjee. Sir,
Yes.
please unmute yourself and say something.
Okay. Saurabh Chatterjee. He is asking the question. Okay, fine. To whom? Saurabh Babu.
Sir.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes.
My question is to Jayanta sir is that that book Limits of Growth was actually published in 1971, which first questioned the ecological limit of economic growth. From then to today, there is an effort from a section of economists to include energy and ecology into the production function of neoclassical production function. Do you believe that if we somehow achieve to do that, if we somehow achieve to include ecological cost or energy cost, what is known in the conventional economics today as externalities, if we can bring in those externalities into the production function, then all problems will be solved. Or otherwise, we need an entire different approach to economy and ecology relationship. This is my question.
Okay, that's a very important question. Now, this question has been discussed at length in the Indian Society for Ecological Economics, particularly with Professor Kanchan Chopra. The question is, ecology is always a half-known truth. The more you interact with a natural process, the more you learn about ecology. Ecology has a frontier which is constantly advancing. When we are within the frontier, you probably will be able to evaluate and put some of the parameters into the production function. But who knew when the steam engine rolled in United Kingdom that the carbon dioxide that was emitted by coal burnt in would come back to us as cyclones in the Bay of Bengal? How could you have put that whole cost of cyclones into the production function at that time? So there is always a dividing line of ecological processes that are known, ecological processes that could be known in future, and there is a constant expansion. So my answer to you is that it is always a half truth. It cannot be always a pakka final evaluation of any economic process.
Thank you, sir. Next, Sanjay Kumar Mahato, would you please unmute yourself? Nilanjan Saha.